My girlfriend demanded I cut off my female friend while keeping her ex's romantic photo as her background. So, I kept my options open, and the karma was instant. I'm a 29-year-old guy, working as a logistics manager at a massive distribution hub just outside of Denver, Colorado. It is a decent job with decent pay, and it allowed me to buy my own place, a modest 3-bedroom house. I scooped up for about $310,000 a few years ago, when the market took a slight dip. It is nothing incredibly fancy, just a solid suburban ranch-style home with a 2-car garage that I spent months converting into a fully functional home gym. I am not rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I am stable. I have my life together, I pay my mortgage on time, I contribute heavily to my 401k, and I have a reliable routine. I've been at the same logistics company for nearly 7 years now, working my way up from the freezing loading docks to a comfortable management position. The job is physically and mentally demanding, but it is straightforward. I show up, I manage my team, I ensure that dozens of freight shipments go out on a strict schedule, and I handle the occasional nightmare when a forklift breaks down or half the crew calls in sick with the flu. The best part of the job is that once I clock out, I am done. I don't take the warehouse problems home with me. I leave the stress at the door. My girlfriend at the time, Chloe, 25 female, worked in retail management at a high-end boutique clothing store in one of the more upscale malls in the city. We had been together for about a year and a half when this entire exhausting mess started. We originally met through mutual friends at a massive Super Bowl watch party. She seemed incredibly cool, laid back, and we hit it off almost immediately, spending the entire fourth quarter talking in the kitchen while everyone else was screaming at the television. Things were genuinely great for the first year. She moved into my house about 8 months into the relationship. It just made sense financially for her, considering she was paying an absolute fortune for a tiny, cramped studio apartment across town that barely had working heat. We agreed to split the utilities and the grocery bills, while I continued to cover the entire mortgage since it was my property. It was a standard, logical arrangement that worked perfectly fine for both of us. The move-in process was relatively smooth. She didn't bring much furniture with her, mostly just endless boxes of clothes, shoes, and personal items. I gladly cleared out half of the master closet, gave her the 2 largest dresser drawers, and made plenty of space for her extensive skincare routine in the master bathroom. It was basic cohabitation stuff that felt completely natural and exciting at the time. Because of her job at the mall, Chloe had incredibly irregular hours, working lots of late evenings, split shifts, and chaotic weekends. I worked a standard, predictable Monday through Friday schedule, usually clocking in at 6:00 a.m. and leaving by 3:00 p.m. Our schedules certainly didn't always align perfectly, but we made a conscious effort to make it work. She would often be rushing out the door for a closing shift just as I was getting home, exhausted and covered in warehouse dust. Or I would be dead asleep when she finally crawled into bed at midnight after a grueling inventory count. However, we always made sure to have breakfast together on her days off, which usually fell on random Tuesdays and Wednesdays. She would stand in the kitchen and make these incredibly elaborate egg dishes, omelets packed with fresh spinach, bell peppers, and feta cheese, while I would handle the coffee situation, grinding the dark roast beans, and getting the French press ready. We had this comfortable, quiet routine down to an absolute science. It felt like we were building a real, sustainable life together. The very first time I truly noticed the bizarre phone background situation was around our 10th month together. We were sitting on my faded leather couch, a hand-me-down from my older brother, watching some grim true crime documentary about a cold case from the 1990s. The living room was dark, save for the blue light of the television reflecting off the coffee table. Suddenly, Chloe's phone, which was resting face up on the armrest between us, lit up brightly with a random notification. The screen illuminated the dim room, and my eyes were naturally drawn to it. It wasn't just a generic wallpaper or a picture of her dog. It was a high-resolution, professionally framed photo of Chloe standing on a pristine, white sand beach at sunset, looking off into the distance. Honestly, she looked absolutely stunning in it. The composition of the photo was flawless. The golden hour lighting hit her collarbone perfectly. The azure waves were crashing gently in the background, and her hair was caught mid-movement by the ocean breeze. It was the exact kind of photo that looks like it belongs on the cover of a luxury travel magazine. She was wearing this flowy white linen dress, looking out at the horizon with this incredibly peaceful, romantic expression. Objectively speaking, it was a beautiful image. "That's a really nice photo," I said casually, not thinking much of it as I took a sip of my water. When was that taken? Oh, that's from like 2 years ago, she replied, barely glancing up from the television screen. The lighting is just so good, right? It's honestly my favorite picture of myself. Fair enough, I said, shrugging it off. We all have those rare photos where the angles, the lighting, and the environment just work perfectly to make us look like models. I genuinely didn't think twice about it at the time. It was just a picture. However, a few weeks later, we were out to dinner at a crowded downtown Italian restaurant with her best friend Sarah. We were halfway through our garlic knots and expensive red wine when the topic of the phone came up again. Sarah jokingly made some passing comment about how Chloe absolutely refused to ever change her phone background, teasing her about how she had kept the exact same photo on her lock screen for literal years. It's just such a good picture. Chloe defended herself, laughing as she took a sip of her wine. The lighting is literally perfect. The composition is amazing. I look great in it. Why in the world would I ever change it? I glanced down at her phone, which was sitting next to her plate on the table. There it was again. That beach sunset photo? Something about the specific way they were discussing it, the slight edge in Sarah's voice, felt incredibly off to me, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. Later that night, as I was driving us back to my house, the silence in the car felt heavy. I decided to ask about it directly. So, that beach photo on your phone, I started, keeping my eyes on the dark highway. Where exactly was that taken? You said it was a couple of years ago. Oh, it was during a trip to Cabo I took a while back, she said, her voice entirely too casual. A solo trip, I asked? She hesitated. It was just a fraction of a second, but it was a fraction too long. The kind of hesitation that completely gives away the truth before the words even leave a person's mouth. No, she finally sighed, shifting uncomfortably in the passenger seat. I was there with Marcus, my ex, but that is absolutely not why I keep it as my background. It is genuinely just a really, really good photo of me. The relationship is completely over and done with. The photo is just a photo. And there it was. The ugly truth dropped right into my lap. Her phone background, the very first thing she looked at every single morning when she woke up, and the very last thing she looked at every single night before she went to sleep, was a photo taken by her ex-boyfriend on a romantic, couples-only beach getaway. It wasn't a fun group shot with friends where he happened to be in the frame. It wasn't a family vacation photo. It was a direct, intimate memento of a romantic trip with her previous long-term relationship. That doesn't bother you? I asked, trying to keep my voice level and calm. Having a constant reminder of your ex on your phone? Why would it? She shot back, her tone instantly defensive. The relationship ended a long time ago, but the photo is still good. It's not like I'm looking at him in the picture. He's behind the camera. It's just a picture of me. Yeah, but he took it, I pointed out, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. He took it on a romantic vacation that you two went on together. That is objectively kind of weird to keep as your absolute main background when you live with your current boyfriend. She crossed her arms over her chest, her face flushing with anger. You are being completely insecure right now. It is literally just a photo. What, should I go through and delete every single picture from my past just because I'm dating you now? Am I not allowed to have a history? I am not saying you need to delete it, I replied, frustrated by how quickly she was twisting my words. I am saying that maybe you shouldn't have a romantic souvenir from your ex-boyfriend as the primary thing you see every time you check your text messages. There is a massive difference between keeping a photo in an album and displaying it like a billboard on your phone. You are making this into a way bigger deal than it actually is, she snapped, staring out the window into the darkness. The photo has absolutely nothing to do with Marcus. It is entirely about me looking good in good lighting. End of story. We dropped the argument for the rest of the night, but the realization gnawed at me constantly. Not because I am some wildly jealous, controlling guy who cannot handle the fact that his girlfriend had a life before him. I am nearly 30 years old. I have had serious relationships before too. I have baggage. But there is a massive, undeniable difference between quietly acknowledging someone's romantic history and actively, proudly displaying a piece of it as your daily phone background. Over the next few painstaking months, the situation only escalated. I started noticing other, far more concerning things. She would regularly get text messages from Marcus at incredibly weird, inappropriate hours. When I first asked who kept blowing up her phone at 10:30 p.m. on a Friday, she casually waved it off, saying, "Oh, it's just Marcus, just a friend from before." The name started coming up a lot. Way too much for someone who was supposedly just a friend from before. The text messages would come rolling in constantly. at 11:00 at night, during our dinners, while we were trying to watch movies, and even while we were in the middle of serious conversations. She would always, without fail, check the notifications immediately. Sometimes she would sit there typing out long, quick responses while I was mid-sentence. When I would finally stop talking and just stare at her, waiting for her to give me a shred of attention, she would look up, blink innocently, and say, "Oh, sorry, what were you saying?" I was distracted. It quickly started to feel like I was actively competing for my own girlfriend's attention with a guy I had never even met inside the house that I owned. One freezing Tuesday morning, we were sitting at the kitchen island having breakfast. She had made her signature spinach omelets. Suddenly, her phone buzzed violently on the granite countertop. 3 rapid-fire texts in succession. All from Marcus. She immediately picked up the phone, a massive smile spreading across her face at whatever he had sent her. She started typing furiously, completely ignoring her food while her eggs got cold and rubbery. "Must be a pretty fascinating conversation," I said, unable to hide the irritation in my voice. "Oh, it's just Marcus being dumb," she laughed, not looking up from the screen. "He sent me this hilarious meme about corporate retail stuff. You guys sure seem to talk about work a lot," I noted, taking a slow sip of my coffee. "Well, sometimes he's the only one who really gets it, you know?" She sighed, setting the phone down. "Retail management problems are very specific. You wouldn't really understand." "Where exactly does he work?" I asked, realizing I had never actually gotten the details of his life. She hesitated again, picking at her cold eggs with her fork. Different store location, but same parent company, actually. That felt like massively important information that she had deliberately and intentionally withheld from me for over a year. They worked for the exact same corporate umbrella. They saw each other regularly at corporate events. They were in the same professional ecosystem. "Wait, so you actively see him at work?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "Sometimes," she shrugged defensively. "At quarterly district meetings, regional training sessions, that kind of boring corporate thing. It's not a big deal." "Huh," I scoffed, shaking my head. "Don't start with me," she warned, pointing her fork at me. "He is literally just a friend." "You are being paranoid again." But the texts kept coming. Morning, afternoon, and late into the night. It was a constant, never-ending stream of communication with this so-called friend. While I felt like I was lucky if I could get half of her undivided attention during a 30-minute dinner, one night, her phone was charging on the kitchen counter while she was taking a shower. The screen lit up, and a text from Marcus popped onto the lock screen, right over that beautiful sunset beach photo. The text read, "Miss talking to you like we used to. This new district manager is killing me." I didn't open the phone. I didn't snoop through her private messages. I wasn't raised to invade someone's privacy like that. But I also wasn't stupid. I could read the writing on the wall, the romantic beach photo background, the constant, late-night texting with her ex, the aggressive, defensive reactions whenever I dared to bring any of it up. The pattern was glaringly clear, and it was deeply disrespectful. A few days later, my buddy Dave from the warehouse noticed I was completely off my game. We were in the freezing backlot, doing a massive inventory check on a delayed shipment of electronics, when he finally stopped checking his clipboard and asked what was eating at me. "Girl problems, man," I told him, blowing warm air into my frozen hands. "I'm pretty sure my girlfriend is still hung up on her ex-boyfriend." "Did she actually say that to you?" Dave asked, raising an eyebrow. "Not in those exact words," I explained, kicking at a loose piece of gravel. "But her phone background is a romantic photo he took of her on a vacation in Cabo. They text each other at all hours of the night, and whenever I mention that it makes me uncomfortable, she bites my head off and calls me insecure and controlling." Dave whistled low, shaking his head slowly. "Man, that is straight up disrespectful. My wife tried some similar nonsense very early on in our relationship." I shut that down immediately. "Look, everyone is allowed to have a past, but you do not proudly display your past in your current partner's face every single day." "She constantly says I'm just being insecure," I muttered, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. "Nah, brother, you are being completely normal," Dave said firmly, patting my shoulder. "She is testing your boundaries. She is actively seeing exactly how much disrespect you will put up with before you snap. If you let this slide, she's going to keep pushing." That conversation with Dave stuck with me like glue. Dave had been happily married for over a decade. He seemed to have the whole relationship dynamic figured out. The more I thought about it, the more I realized he was absolutely right. I decided right then and there to run a little experiment. If Chloe could keep her options open by staying in constant, intimate contact with her ex-boyfriend and literally staring at romantic photos from their relationship every single day, then I could absolutely keep my own options open too. I didn't plan on cheating. That's not who I am. But I decided I was going to stop closing myself off to other possibilities and friendships just to appease a woman who wouldn't do the same for me. I started small. I reconnected with some old female friends from college that I had slowly lost touch with. I accepted a few social media friend requests from women that I had previously ignored out of respect for Chloe. I started having actual engaged conversations with people at the gym, at the grocery store, and at work functions. Nothing inappropriate. Just being a social, available, friendly human being. There was a woman named Elena who worked in the front corporate office at my logistics company. She was the HR and safety administrator. We had said hi in passing 100 times over the years, but we had never really stopped to talk. She was incredibly attractive, around my age, 28, and always seemed sharp and witty. One Thursday afternoon, I had to stop by her desk to file some mandatory incident reports after one of the forklift drivers, a guy named Gary, tweaked his shoulder lifting a heavy pallet incorrectly. We ended up chatting for nearly 45 minutes. She was remarkably funny, incredibly easy to talk to, and at no point during our entire conversation did she mention an ex-boyfriend or have his face plastered on her phone screen. These OSHA forms are an absolute nightmare, Elena groaned, pulling up the endless digital templates on her dual monitors. Corporate administration absolutely loves their useless bureaucracy. Tell me about it, I laughed, leaning against her desk. Last month, they made the entire warehouse crew retake the basic forklift certification exam, even though most of these guys have been driving them flawlessly for 15 years. Elena laughed, a genuine, warm sound. Oh, I remember typing up that exact memo. I am pretty sure half the guys in the warehouse were actively cursing my name in the break room. Nah, I smiled. We save our real cursing for the executives who write the terrible policies, not the people who are just stuck enforcing them. We know you're just the messenger. I appreciate that. She smiled back, her eyes crinkling. You would be shocked at how many people love to shoot the messenger around here. We talked the entire time she filled out the tedious paperwork. She casually mentioned that she had been with the company for about 2 years, having transferred down to Denver from a massive facility in Chicago. She had moved here for a fresh start after a particularly brutal, messy breakup. How is Denver treating you so far, I asked, genuinely interested. Better than I expected, honestly, she replied, saving the document. I am still trying to figure out where everything is, and the altitude took some getting used to. But the people here are incredibly nice. Have you found any decent restaurants yet? I asked. Finding good food is like half the battle of moving to a new city. Her eyes immediately lit up. Actually, I have been desperately looking for local recommendations. Everything I've tried so far has just been boring corporate chains. I spent the next 10 minutes giving her a detailed list of my favorite local spots. Nothing crazy fancy? Just solid, authentic local places with incredible food. She pulled out her phone to type the names into her notes app, and as the screen illuminated, I couldn't help but notice her background. It was just a generic, peaceful photo of a pine forest. No ex-boyfriends, no romantic baggage, just trees. After that day, Elena and I started having lunch together occasionally. It was just two coworkers being friendly, breaking up the monotony of the workday. She would tell me all about her weekend hiking plans, and I would tell her about my endless home improvement projects. Sometimes Chloe's name came up in conversation naturally. Sometimes it didn't. The lunches quickly became a regular, highly anticipated part of my week. Usually on Wednesdays, and sometimes on Fridays if our chaotic schedules happened to align. We would leave the industrial park and hit up the various food trucks that parked near the main highway, standing in the freezing wind, trying whatever spicy Korean BBQ or gourmet grilled cheese looked good that day. One crisp Saturday afternoon, we randomly bumped into each other and decided to grab lunch at this incredible, hole-in-the-wall Ethiopian restaurant downtown. The place was tiny, smelling heavily of rich spices, and packed shoulder to shoulder with people. We ordered a massive combo platter, sitting in a corner booth, eating the spicy stews with our hands using the spongy injera bread. This is absolutely incredible, Elena said, her eyes wide as she tried the spicy lentils. Why did literally nobody in the office tell me about this place? Maybe they wanted to keep the good spots a secret from the HR department, I joked, tearing off another piece of bread. We sat in that tiny booth for over 2 hours, talking about everything. She told me deeply personal stories about her life before Chicago. about her family, and about her long-term goals. I told her about my grueling path from the freezing loading docks to the supervisor's desk, and we laughed about our completely opposite tastes in music. She loved indie folk, while I was strictly a classic rock guy. It was effortless. Meanwhile, at home, things with Chloe remained exactly the same, if not worse. The romantic beach photo was still glowing brightly on her phone screen every single day. Marcus was still texting her at all hours of the night, and she was still violently insisting that absolutely none of it meant anything, and that I was just being a crazy, overreacting boyfriend. "You are being so deeply paranoid," she would sigh dramatically, rolling her eyes whenever I brought up Marcus's late-night texts. "He is literally just a friend. We have history together, but that is all it is. Ancient history. History that you actively choose to look at on your phone screen every single day of your life," I pointed out coldly. "Oh my God, let it go already," she screamed one night, throwing her hands in the air. "The photo is staying. It's my phone. If you seriously cannot handle a picture, then maybe you are just way too insecure to be in an adult relationship." That specific line right there. Too insecure for a relationship. It was a classic, textbook manipulation tactic. She was trying to frame my completely normal, healthy boundaries as a fundamental character flaw, so that I would feel crazy and back down. But I didn't back down. I just completely stopped engaging with her nonsense. If she wanted to keep that photo and keep her ex on the hook, fine. I would keep my own options open. Elena and I started hanging out more outside of work. We would grab coffee before our early shifts, or get lunch on the weekends when we both had free time. During one of our coffee meetups, she opened up more about her past. She mentioned that she had gotten out of a highly toxic relationship a few months before moving to Denver. She wasn't actively looking for anything serious right now. She just genuinely enjoyed having someone normal to talk to. "What exactly happened with your ex in Chicago, if you don't mind me asking?" I asked gently, stirring my black coffee. Elena let out a heavy sigh, tracing the rim of her mug. "He just couldn't let go of his previous relationship. He kept constantly comparing me to his ex-girlfriend. He kept bringing her up in random conversations. He even had all these framed photos of them together, still sitting around his apartment, months after we started dating. It was emotionally exhausting. I felt like I was constantly competing with a ghost." "Wow," I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "That sounds incredibly familiar. Are you sure we aren't dating the same person? Are you going through something similar?" she asked, her expression softening with immediate empathy. I finally unloaded the entire story. I told her all about the beach photo background, the constant late-night texts from Marcus, the gaslighting, and the accusations of insecurity. Elena actually laughed out loud, shaking her head in disbelief. "That is absolutely wild," she said, her tone entirely supportive. "My ex pulled the exact same manipulative garbage. He said it was just a good photo. Like, yeah, buddy. It's a great photo of you wrapping your arms around someone else on a romantic trip. Read the room. It is deeply disrespectful to your current partner. It felt so incredibly good to finally talk to someone who just got it. Someone who didn't make me feel like I was a crazy, unreasonable monster for wanting basic respect in my own home." Elena and I never crossed any physical lines. There was no kissing, no holding hands, absolutely nothing that would ever qualify as physical cheating. But we undeniably had chemistry. It was the kind of easy, natural, flowing back and forth connection that suddenly makes you realize that you might be forcing things with the wrong person at home. About 3 months into my growing friendship with Elena, we decided to go hiking at a beautiful state park in the foothills of the Rockies, about an hour outside of Denver. It was a stunning, crisp Saturday afternoon. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The trails were lined with towering pines, and it was just two friends hanging out. The drive up the mountain was hilarious. Elena completely hijacked my truck's stereo, aggressively subjecting me to a playlist of terrible, twangy country songs about heartbreak and cheap whiskey. She sang along to every single word, completely and unapologetically off-key, while I laughed until my ribs hurt. The hike itself was of moderate difficulty, a steep 3-mile climb up to a rocky summit with a massive elevation gain. Elena kept the pace easily, not even losing her breath, as she enthusiastically chatted about office drama the entire way up. When we finally reached the top, the view was absolutely breathtaking. The sprawling valley below us, the jagged peaks in the distance, and the crisp mountain air made everything feel perfect. Elena pulled out her phone, her cheeks flushed from the cold and the climb. Get in here, she smiled, grabbing my shoulder and pulling me into the frame of her camera. We took a few quick selfies together. Nothing remotely romantic. Just two exhausted, happy people smiling at the camera, wearing bulky winter jackets, with a stunning mountain range behind us. She checked the photos, nodded in approval, and put her phone away. On the long hike back down the mountain, our conversation turned deeper. We talked about relationships, about how her ex in Chicago had been suffocatingly controlling, always needing to track her location on her phone, and how she had felt completely trapped, even though he constantly claimed his behavior was just out of love. That isn't love, Elena said quietly, stepping over a large tree root. That is ownership. It took me way too long and a lot of tears to finally figure out the difference between the two. We grabbed greasy burgers at a roadside diner on the way back down the mountain, sitting in a vinyl booth, eating and talking until the sun went down. It was effortless conversation. No pressure, no hidden games, no walking on eggshells. Later that night, Elena posted one of the summit photos to her Instagram. She tagged my account and captioned it, "Great hike with great company. Survived the mountain." I liked the post, didn't think much of it, and went to sleep. Chloe and I followed each other on all social media platforms, but we rarely ever interacted there. She was obsessed with curating an aesthetic feed, and I barely ever posted anything. She never liked my rare posts, and I rarely commented on hers. It was just a digital connection that we didn't actively use. Apparently, however, Chloe noticed this specific post immediately. I was in the middle of a chaotic Monday shift at the warehouse, dealing with a massive forklift failure on the loading dock, when my phone started vibrating violently in my pocket. It didn't stop. I pulled it out to find a massive wall of texts from Chloe. "Who the hell is Elena? Why are you going on romantic hikes with other women? This is so incredibly disrespectful to me. We need to talk right now. Answer your phone. I literally cannot believe you would do this to me behind my back. You are unbelievable. Answer me." The furious texts just kept rolling in, one after another. I stared at the screen for a moment, a cold sense of absolute clarity washing over me. The sheer, unadulterated hypocrisy of her outrage was almost comical. I silenced my phone, shoved it back into my pocket, and went back to work. I had a massive truckload of inventory to check in, and I absolutely did not have the time or the patience for her manufactured relationship drama during my shift. I decided to let her stew in her own anger for a few hours. I finished my shift, clocked out, and drove home in silence. When I finally unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Chloe was sitting rigidly on the living room couch, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her face set in a furious, dark expression that meant a massive fight was imminent. "Do you want to explain that photo to me?" she demanded sharply, before I had even managed to set my keys down on the counter. "Which photo?" I asked calmly, taking off my boots. "Do not play dumb with me," she spat, standing up. "The hiking photo on Instagram. With that woman." "Elena." "Oh, that," I said, walking into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. "We went hiking on Saturday. She is a friend from the corporate office." "A friend?" Chloe scoffed loudly, following me into the kitchen. "Since when do you go on intimate, romantic mountain hikes with just friends?" I almost laughed out loud at the staggering irony of her words. "It wasn't a romantic hike, Chloe. We hiked up a public trail, in broad daylight, as friends. Like normal people do. You were all over each other in that picture," she yelled, her face turning red. I calmly pulled my phone out of my pocket, opened Instagram, and held the photo up to her face. In the picture, we were standing next to each other, both smiling at the camera, wearing bulky winter coats, with probably 8 inches of visible space between our shoulders. "All over each other is a massive, hilarious exaggeration," I said flatly. "We were taking a standard selfie at the summit of a mountain. There is absolutely nothing inappropriate about this photo." "It is completely inappropriate," she screamed, slapping her hand on the granite counter. "You are in a committed relationship. You should not be going on secret dates with other women behind my back." "First of all, it wasn't a date," I replied, my voice dropping to a low, cold tone. "And second of all, even if it was, I am just keeping my options open. Just like you do with Marcus, every single day." Her face went pale for a second before the anger returned red hot. "That is completely different, and you know it." "How?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Explain to me exactly how it is different." "Marcus is just a friend. We have history," she yelled defensively. You are literally out here seeing someone else behind my back. I slowly sat down on one of the kitchen bar stools, keeping my posture relaxed and my voice dead calm. Let me make sure I have this straight. You are allowed to text your ex-boyfriend at all hours of the night. You are allowed to keep a romantic photo he took of you on a couple's vacation as the main background on your phone. And when I tell you it hurts me, that is totally fine, because it's just history. And I am just an insecure, controlling monster for having a problem with it. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a second before delivering the final blow. But I go on a public hike in broad daylight with a female coworker, take one innocent photo with a foot of space between us, and suddenly I am the bad guy betraying you? Yes, she yelled, tears of frustration forming in her eyes. Because I am not interested in Marcus romantically. You are clearly interested in this, Elena person. And you are clearly still completely hung up on Marcus. I shot back, my voice echoing in the kitchen. The difference is, at least I am honest about the fact that I am tired of being treated like a second-class citizen in my own relationship. I am not hung up on Marcus, she screamed, her voice cracking. How many times do I have to say it? We are friends. That is it. Then change your phone background right now, I challenged, staring directly into her eyes. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence filled the kitchen. She just stood there, her mouth slightly open, staring at me as if I had just asked her to cut off her own arm. That's exactly what I thought, I said, a bitter wave of vindication washing over me. You won't change it. You will never change it. Because that photo, that toxic relationship, and Marcus himself, they all still mean something deeply important to you. You want to keep that door wide open for him, while aggressively demanding that I bolt every single other door in my life shut. It's pathetic. This is insane, she cried, throwing her hands over her face. You are deflecting. This isn't about my phone. It is about you emotionally cheating on me. I am not cheating, I stated firmly. I went hiking with a friend. We took a photo. That is the end of the story. Then why did she post it? Chloe demanded, pacing the floor. Why did she tag you? She is clearly trying to stake a claim on you. Or, and hear me out on this crazy theory, she posted a nice photo from a fun afternoon like millions of normal human beings do every single day, I said sarcastically. You are reading way too much into this. No, you are the one reading way too much into my friendship with Marcus, she fired back. You have been weird and controlling about this from the very start. We went in agonizing circles for another hour, her aggressively insisting that Elena was a massive threat and that I was betraying her trust. While I relentlessly pointed out the blinding double standard of her behavior, neither of us was budging an inch. Finally, I was exhausted. I looked at her, standing in my kitchen, and I asked the one question that finally ended the charade. Do you still love Marcus? She froze. It was just for a second, but it was long enough. The hesitation was deafening. That's not fair, she whispered, looking down at the floor. Answer the question, Chloe, I demanded, my voice hard. I care about him, she stammered, twisting her rings nervously. But not like that. Not anymore. Not. We had something intense once. But it's over. But you still love him? I pressed, refusing to let her off the hook. Stop putting words in my mouth, she snapped, looking up with panicked eyes. Then answer the simple question, I said. Do you love Marcus? Yes or no? It is a binary question. It is not that simple, she cried, tears finally spilling over her cheeks. It really, truly is, I said quietly, the anger draining out of me, leaving nothing but cold exhaustion. Either you are over him, or you are not. Either this relationship with me is your priority, or it is a placeholder. Which is it? She stood up abruptly, grabbed her phone off the counter, the screen lighting up to reveal that damn beach sunset photo, illuminating her tear-streaked face, and walked toward the door. I need some air. This is way too much. She walked out the front door, the hinges slamming shut behind her. She didn't come back for over 3 hours. When she finally walked back in around midnight, she acted like absolutely nothing. She quietly got into bed and turned off the lamp. I didn't bring the argument up again that night, but something fundamental in our dynamic had violently shifted. I was no longer the one scrambling to explain myself. I was no longer on the defense. The tables had completely turned, and Chloe had absolutely no idea how to handle the loss of control. Over the next few tense weeks, Chloe became borderline obsessed with Elena. She was constantly, frantically checking my phone whenever she thought I wasn't looking. She started interrogating me about where I was going, exactly who I was going to be with, and what time I would be home. She was actively exhibiting the exact same paranoid controlling behavior she had viciously accused me of when I had merely questioned her late-night texts with Marcus. Meanwhile, Elena and I kept hanging out. We were still strictly friends, but I won't lie and pretend that the possibility of something more wasn't heavily hanging in the air between us. We just clicked in a profound way that Chloe and I never had. Our conversations flowed naturally, devoid of any drama, mind games, or exhausting double standards. Update 1. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Elena invited me to a large outdoor music festival in a downtown park. It was a lineup of local indie bands, surrounded by dozens of food trucks. The weather was perfect. I was getting dressed when I casually mentioned my plans to Chloe, who was sitting on the bed scrolling through her phone. "You're going to a concert with her?" Chloe asked, her voice dripping with venom. "Yeah, it should be a good time," I said, pulling on my boots. "You can come with us if you want." "It's a public park." I knew for a fact she wouldn't come. Chloe hated large crowds, hated outdoor festivals, and despised indie music. "I literally cannot believe you are doing this," she sneered, tossing her phone onto the mattress. "You are actively throwing our entire relationship away for some random HR woman you barely even know." "I have known Elena for nearly 5 months," I corrected her calmly. "We work for the same company. We are friends. Going to a public park to listen to music is not throwing anything away. It is when you are actively choosing to spend your weekend with her over me," she yelled, standing up. "I am not choosing anyone over anyone," I sighed, grabbing my wallet. "I am going to a concert with a friend. You are more than welcome to join us. I literally just invited you." "I shouldn't have to invite myself along on your dates," she screamed. "You should want to spend your time with me, not her." "I spend plenty of time with you, Chloe," I said, walking toward the bedroom door. "I am a grown man. I am allowed to have friends. Not friends who are clearly trying to steal you away," she yelled as I walked down the hallway. The concert was incredible. Elena and I spent the afternoon eating massive food truck tacos, laughing on a blanket in the grass, and listening to the bands. It was purely friendly, but something massive shifted in my brain that day. As the sun set over the park, I looked over at Elena, who was laughing at a joke I just made, and I realized a brutal truth. I was exponentially happier spending 3 hours on a picnic blanket with Elena than I had been living with Chloe for the past 6 months. On the walk back to her car, the city lights reflecting off the pavement, Elena bumped her shoulder against mine and asked softly, "What is actually going on with you and Chloe? You seem really stressed lately." "Honestly, I'm not sure anymore," I admitted, rubbing the back of my neck. "Things have been incredibly toxic. The whole phone background thing. That's just a symptom. It's way bigger than that. It's the constant double standards, the emotional manipulation, the fact that she demands I accept her staying intimately connected to her ex while she absolutely loses her mind if I simply have a female friend. That sounds completely asphyxiating," Elena said sympathetically. "It is," I breathed out. We sat in her parked car for a long time, the engine idling to keep the heater running. She told me more about the end of her last relationship, how her ex had slowly, methodically isolated her from all of her friends until she felt completely trapped and alone. How finally packing her bags and leaving him was the hardest, yet most liberating decision she had ever made. "I am definitely not telling you that you should break up with Chloe," Elena said carefully, looking at me in the dim light of the dashboard. "That is entirely your call to make. But strictly from an outside perspective, looking in, it doesn't sound healthy at all. You are a good guy. You deserve someone who actually respects you." That night, I drove home with a heavy heart, knowing what I had to do. But when I unlocked the front door, I was hit with the overwhelming smell of roasted garlic and tomatoes. I walked into the dining room to find that Chloe had cooked a massive, elaborate dinner. There were lit candles on the table, soft jazz music playing from the speakers, the whole desperate romantic setup. She was trying to put on a show. She had set the table with the nice plates we never used and filled our glasses with an expensive red wine. She walked out of the kitchen wearing the exact dark red dress I had complimented her on months ago. Her hair was perfectly curled, her makeup flawless. "What is all this?" I asked, genuinely taken aback by the sudden whiplash of her behavior. "I have been doing a lot of thinking today," she said softly, walking over and placing her hands on my chest. "About us. About what you said the other night. I don't want to lose you." She had spent hours making chicken parmesan entirely from scratch, my absolute favorite meal. We sat down at the table to eat. The food was objectively fantastic. "This is really incredible, Chloe," I said honestly, taking another bite. "Thank you. I wanted to do something special for us," she smiled, swirling her wine. But the entire time we sat there trying to play house, her phone sat face up on the dining table. And 3 separate times during that romantic dinner, the screen lit up brightly, displaying that damn romantic beach sunset background. Every single notification was a text from Marcus. I watched her eyes dart to the screen every single time. She would read the preview of the message, offer me a forced, tight smile, and pretend she wasn't distracted. She wasn't answering him, but she was acutely aware of every single word he was sending her. After we finished eating, she brought out a slice of expensive cheesecake from a fancy bakery downtown. "I really meant what I said," she whispered, reaching across the table to touch my hand. "I don't want to lose this relationship. We need to actually talk about our issues." "I agree," I said slowly, "and I am ready to work on things. Starting with the obvious." I nodded toward her phone. She pulled her hand back slightly, staring at the device. For one brief, fleeting second, I genuinely thought she was going to unlock it and finally change the background. Instead, she just sighed heavily and pushed it a few inches away. "Look, I can promise to text Marcus a lot less," she offered, her voice pleading. "And I will actively try to be less weird and jealous about your friendship with Elena." "That is a fair compromise, right? What about the photo?" I asked flatly. "Can we please not do this right now?" she groaned, her shoulders dropping. "I literally spent 3 hours making this beautiful dinner. I am trying so hard here." "You are trying to put a band-aid on a bullet hole, Chloe," I said, my patience finally evaporating. "You are not actually changing the core issue. You are offering to text your ex slightly less, and you are offering to trust me more, but the romantic photo stays. Why? Why is it such an incredibly big deal for you to just change a picture?" "Because it is literally just a picture," she cried, her voice echoing in the dining room. "No, it's not," I fired back. "It represents absolutely everything that is wrong with this relationship. It is you actively keeping one foot planted firmly in your past, while aggressively demanding that I keep both of my feet locked in our present." Right on cue, her phone buzzed violently against the wood table. Marcus again. She looked down at the screen, then back up at me. Without thinking, she reached out, picked up the phone, read the full message, and a tiny, involuntary smile crept onto her lips. She locked the screen, looked at me and said, "Sorry, what were you saying?" That was the exact moment my heart completely flatlined. That was the moment I realized that all the expensive wine, the lit candles, and the homemade chicken parmesan meant absolutely nothing if she couldn't even put her phone face down for one single, relationship-saving conversation. "I'm done," I said, standing up from the table and tossing my napkin down. "What?" she gasped, her eyes widening in panic. "I am sleeping in the spare bedroom tonight," I said, walking out of the dining room without looking back. I went into the spare room, locked the door, and collapsed onto the mattress. Through the thin walls, I could hear her sobbing in the kitchen. 10 minutes later, the crying stopped, and I distinctly heard the low murmur of her voice as she made a phone call. She was calling Marcus. I knew it in my bones. Update 2. The next morning, I woke up to a text message from Elena. "Hope last night wasn't too rough." "Coffee before work?" "Definitely," I replied immediately. The next few weeks were a masterclass in suffocating tension. Chloe and I were merely coexisting in my house, acting more like hostile roommates than a couple. She would sit on the couch aggressively texting on her phone. I would spend 3 hours working out in the garage gym just to avoid her. Meanwhile, Elena and I grew incredibly close. We talked every single day. I knew intricate details about her life, and she knew mine. I knew it wasn't exactly fair to Chloe to be building this emotional connection, but it also wasn't fair that Chloe demanded my undivided loyalty while giving her emotional energy to her ex-boyfriend. Two wrongs absolutely do not make a right, but sometimes they balance the scales enough to show you the truth. The absolute breaking point came on a random, rainy Tuesday evening. I got home from the warehouse, exhausted and soaked, only to find Chloe furiously pacing around the master bedroom, throwing clothes haphazardly into a large overnight duffel bag. "What is going on?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe, watching her chaotic movements. "I'm going to stay at my mom's house for a few days," she snapped, aggressively stuffing a pile of sweaters into the bag without folding them. Her movements were jerky and violent, as if she were angry at the clothes for simply existing. "I need some serious time to think." Think about what? I asked calmly, crossing my arms. About us, she yelled, slamming a dresser drawer shut. About whether this relationship is even worth fighting for anymore. Part of me, the weak, comfortable part, wanted to step forward, grab her hands, and beg her to stay so we could figure it out. But the much larger, rational part of me was just so unbelievably tired. I was tired of the constant double standards. I was tired of feeling like I was in a bizarre love triangle with a guy I had never met. I was tired of being made to feel crazy for having normal, healthy boundaries. Okay, I said softly, my voice completely devoid of emotion. Take all the time you need. She froze instantly. She stopped packing, her hands hovering over the duffel bag. And she slowly turned to look at me with sheer, unadulterated shock. She had clearly expected me to panic. She had expected me to block the door and beg her not to leave. That's it? She asked, her voice trembling. You're just going to stand there and let me walk out? What exactly do you want me to say, Chloe? I sighed, rubbing my temples. I have been desperately trying to talk to you about our fundamental issues for months. You shut me down, insult me, and gaslight me every single time. If you need space to think, then take it. Don't you even care that I am literally packing my bags? She cried, tears welling up. Of course I care, I said honestly. But I am not going to force someone to stay in my house if they don't want to be here. She went back to packing, her movements even more aggressive now. She zipped the bag up violently and turned to face me, her eyes flashing with anger. You are so unbelievable, she spat. I am the only one here actively trying to save this relationship, and you are just completely giving up. How exactly are you saving it? I asked, my voice rising slightly. By storming out? By absolutely refusing to compromise on a single thing? I offered to compromise, she yelled. I offered to text Marcus less. You offered to text him slightly less while still keeping him as a massive priority in your life, I corrected her. That is not a compromise, Chloe. That is an insult to my intelligence. She grabbed the handles of her bag, her knuckles turning white. She stared at me for a long time before asking the question she had been dying to ask. Are you sleeping with Elena? No, I answered immediately. We are friends. That is exactly what I say about Marcus, and you don't believe me, she cried. The moment felt incredibly heavy. It felt like we had finally reached the absolute edge of the cliff, and honesty was the only parachute left. I am not sleeping with her, I said slowly, choosing my words with absolute precision. But if you asked me right now if I wanted to, I honestly don't know what I would say. Her face went completely ashen. All the color drained from her cheeks, and her eyes got shiny with fresh tears. For a long, painful minute, she just stood there holding her heavy bag, processing the brutal honesty of my words. She finally nodded slowly, her jaw clenching tight. Well, she whispered, her voice cracking. At least you are finally being honest. Are you still in love with Marcus? I asked. It was the exact same question from weeks ago. But this time, there was nowhere left for her to run. The lies had officially run their course. She slowly set the heavy duffel bag down on the floor, sat heavily on the edge of the mattress, and stared down at her trembling hands for what felt like an eternity. When she finally looked up at me, her eyes were completely shattered. I don't know, she whispered, the words barely audible over the sound of the rain hitting the window. Maybe I never actually stopped. The admission hung in the cold air between us, heavy and suffocating. Everything I had suspected, everything I had fought her on for months, was finally, brutally confirmed. Then I guess that is your answer, I said quietly, turning to leave the room. Wait, she cried, standing up quickly. I don't want to love him. I want to love you. You are so stable and responsible, and you actually have your life together. You own a house. You are the smart choice for me. The smart choice? I repeated, letting out a dark, humorless laugh. Wow. That is incredibly romantic, Chloe. Thank you. You know exactly what I mean, she pleaded, taking a step toward me. Marcus is absolute chaos. He is unpredictable, he is flaky, and he is probably terrible husband material. But there is this massive history there. This intense pull. I genuinely thought that moving in with you would finally make it go away. I thought that building a safe, reliable life with a good man would be enough to erase him. But it's not. She started pacing the room frantically. That is exactly why I need space right now, to figure out what I actually want. You shouldn't need space to figure that out, Chloe, I said, my voice hardening. If you actually loved me, if you truly wanted to build a life with me, there wouldn't be a question in your mind. The sheer fact that you are actively torn between me and a chaotic ex-boyfriend tells you absolutely everything you need to know. So what? She sobbed, burying her face in her hands. We are just completely done? After a year and a half, you are just walking away from me? You are the one with your bags packed, I reminded her gently. I am just accepting the reality of the situation. She grabbed her bag, wiping her face angrily, and hesitated at the front door. I will call you in a few days. After I've had some time to clear my head. Don't bother, I said, leaning against the wall. I think we both know exactly how this story ends. Stop being so incredibly stubborn, she yelled, her hand on the doorknob. I am trying to make this work. No, you aren't, I said coldly. You are trying to keep both of your options open while you sit back and decide who offers you the better deal. And I am absolutely not interested in standing on your auction block. She ripped the door open and walked out into the rain. I stood in the hallway and listened to her car engine start, the tires spinning on the wet pavement as she pulled out of the driveway. I walked slowly back to the master bedroom, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared blindly at the empty closet space. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Elena. Everything okay? You seemed really off at work today. I stared at the text for a moment before typing back. Long story. Can we talk? My place? Or yours? Mine, she replied instantly. I'll order Thai food. I drove across town through the rain and showed up at Elena's apartment an hour later with a bottle of wine and the entire exhausting story. I told her absolutely everything, from the initial phone background fight, to the late-night Marcus texts, to the hiking photo meltdown, and finally, tonight's brutal confession. Elena sat cross-legged on her couch, eating spicy pad thai, listening intently without interrupting me once. So, Elena said softly when I finally finished venting, what are you going to do now? Honestly? I think it is officially over, I sighed, leaning my head back against her couch. It has been over for a long time. It just took me this long to finally admit it out loud. How do you feel about that? She asked, her eyes searching my face. Relieved? Sad? Both? I don't know, I admitted, staring at the ceiling. We definitely had some good times. But we also had this constant, suffocating undercurrent of tension, this horrible feeling that we were actively competing for each other's attention instead of actually being partners. Elena reached over and gently squeezed my hand. You deserve so much better than that. So do you, I said, looking over at her. Your ex in Chicago sounds like he was an absolute nightmare. He was, she smiled sadly. But he taught me exactly what I absolutely do not want in a partner. Sometimes the completely wrong relationship shows you exactly what the right one is supposed to look like. We sat on her couch talking until well past midnight. When I finally stood up to leave, she walked me to the front door. For what it's worth, Elena said softly, leaning against the doorframe. I think you are making the absolute right choice. And, whenever you are actually ready, if you ever want to see what we could potentially be beyond just friends, I would really like that. I looked down at her, a genuine smile breaking across my face for the first time in weeks. Yeah. I would like that a lot, too. I drove home feeling infinitely lighter than I had in months. The rain had stopped, and the city streets were quiet. When I pulled into my driveway, Chloe's car wasn't there. The house was completely empty, dark, and incredibly peaceful. The next afternoon, while I was at work, I got a frantic text from Chloe. Can we please talk tonight? I need to see you. Sure, I replied. I'll be home by 5. But before I even left the warehouse, my phone buzzed again. It was Elena. Hey, weird question. Did you say Chloe's ex's name was Marcus Vance? Works as a district manager for the parent company? Yeah, why? I texted back, confused. A moment later, Elena sent me a screenshot. She explained that she followed the corporate HR network page on LinkedIn, which often linked to employee social media profiles. She had clicked on Marcus's profile out of sheer curiosity. The screenshot was from Marcus's Instagram. It was a photo of him standing on a beautiful beach, holding a velvet box. Next to him was a stunning blonde woman, crying tears of joy, holding up her left hand to show off a massive, glittering diamond ring. The caption read, "She said yes. Here's to forever with my soulmate." I looked closely at the timestamp on the post. It had been posted exactly 24 hours ago, the exact same afternoon that Chloe had suddenly come home crying, packing her bags, and frantically declaring that she needed space to think about our relationship. The puzzle pieces violently and sickeningly snapped together in my brain. Chloe hadn't had a sudden, magical epiphany about her deep love for me. She hadn't gone to her mother's house to do soul-searching. She had seen the engagement post. She had realized that her ultimate backup plan, the man she had been keeping a window open for every single day, had firmly and permanently locked his door. I wasn't her romantic revelation. I was her consolation prize. I was the safe, reliable safety net she was desperately scrambling to secure now that her high-wire act with Marcus was officially over. A cold, hard fury settled into my chest. When I got home at 5 p.m., Chloe was already there. She was sitting in the living room, looking nervous and exhausted. She stood up immediately when I walked in. "I have been doing so much thinking," she started, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, "about everything you said last night. And you are completely right. I wasn't over Marcus when we started dating. I genuinely thought I was, but having him back in my life as a friend brought up all these confusing old feelings. I just stood there, my arms crossed, watching her perform. But I know what I want now," she continued, tears welling up in her eyes. "I want you. I want this house, this life, us. I am going to cut off all contact with Marcus completely. I am going to change my phone background right now. Whatever you need me to do, I will do it." There it was. The grand offer I had practically begged for months ago. Complete, total capitulation on every single point we had viciously fought over. And it meant absolutely nothing to me now. "I don't think that is the solution, Chloe," I said, my voice completely dead. "Why not?" she cried, stepping toward me. "I am literally giving you everything you asked for. I am choosing you because you should want to do those things out of respect for me, not because you suddenly have absolutely no other choice," I said coldly. She froze, her eyes darting back and forth. "What do you mean?" I slowly pulled my phone out of my pocket, pulled up the screenshot Elena had sent me, and held it up to her face. The photo of Marcus and his brand new fiancée gleamed brightly on the screen. "Congratulations to Marcus, by the way," I said, my voice dripping with venom. "Beautiful ring. Tell me, Chloe, what exactly time yesterday did you see this post? Was it right before you started violently packing your bags to go think at your mom's house?" All the remaining color instantly drained from her face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like she had just been physically struck. "You didn't go to your mom's to choose between us," I said, stepping closer, my voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You went there because your primary option permanently took himself off the market, and you realized you were about to lose your comfortable safety net too. You aren't choosing me because you love me. You are settling for me because Marcus is getting married." That's not true," she stammered, tears spilling over her cheeks in a panic. "I swear it's not true. The post has nothing to do with this." "Stop lying," I yelled, the anger finally exploding out of me. "Just stop. It is pathetic. For months, you dismissed my concerns. You called me insecure. You gaslighted me in my own home, all while desperately waiting to see if he would take you back. And the second he puts a ring on someone else's finger, you come crawling back here offering to finally change your damn phone background? It's over, Chloe. We are done." She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably into her hands. Please don't do this. I have nowhere else to go." "You can go to your mom's," I said coldly, turning away from her. "I will give you 2 weeks to find a new apartment and get your stuff out of my house. But we are officially over." "What about Elena?" she cried out bitterly, looking up with mascara running down her face. "Are you just going to run straight to her now?" "Elena has absolutely nothing to do with why this relationship failed," I said, looking back at her one last time. "She just helped me see exactly what I was missing. Mutual respect, honesty, and someone who actually wants to be with me. Not just someone who wants the financial security I provide." I walked into the master bedroom and shut the door, leaving her crying in the living room. 2 incredibly tense weeks later, Chloe officially moved into a cramped, overpriced apartment across town. We split our shared belongings amicably enough. She took her clothes and her endless boxes. I kept the furniture that I had paid for. The day she finally handed over her spare key and drove away for the last time, I sat heavily on the couch in my quiet, empty living room. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I looked at the generic, preloaded landscape photo I had been using as my background for years. I opened my photo gallery, found the selfie of me and Elena at the mountain summit, just 2 people smiling, genuinely happy, with absolutely no toxic baggage or hidden meanings, and I set it as my new lock screen. It felt like taking a massive breath of fresh air. Elena and I officially started dating about a month after Chloe moved out. We took things incredibly slow at first, both of us a little gun-shy from our previous toxic relationships, but it was profoundly different from the very start. It was easy, natural, and built on absolute trust. There were no mind games, no double standards, and no competing with ghosts from the past. About 6 months later, I randomly ran into Chloe at a Whole Foods downtown. She was holding hands with a guy I didn't recognize. He definitely wasn't Marcus. "Hey," she said, looking incredibly awkward as we stopped in the produce aisle. "How have you been?" "Really good, actually," I smiled politely. "You?" "Good," she nodded, gesturing to the guy next to her. "This is Scott." We made awkward small talk for about 2 minutes. Scott seemed like a perfectly normal, nice guy. But as I looked at Chloe, I noticed she looked exhausted. "I'm glad you're doing well, Chloe," I said, turning my shopping cart to leave. "You too," she said softly, her eyes dropping to the floor. "And I really am sorry for everything. You were right about most of it." "Water under the bridge," I said. "Take care of yourself." I walked out of the grocery store into the bright Denver sunshine and headed home. Elena was waiting for me at my house, having promised to help me try out a complicated new recipe for dinner. When I walked through the door, I found her in the kitchen, dancing terribly to classic rock music while chopping vegetables. The whole phone background argument seems incredibly silly in retrospect. It is literally just a phone screen, just a bunch of colored pixels arranged in a certain way. But it represented something so much bigger. It represented someone actively choosing to fiercely protect their connection to their past every single day, while selfishly demanding that I completely erase mine. It was a harsh lesson, but I am grateful for it, because keeping my options open finally led me to exactly where I was supposed to be.